I guess I'll wait for your question.
Okay, well, Clyde, first off, thank you again for helping with my project. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Well, yes. So I'm 85, will be 85 shortly. And so I've seen a lot. I live right now outside of Austin. Uh, we've always done that. I worked for Phillips Petroleum Company for about 31 years and retired in 97. So I've been retired quite a while. And so I read a lot. So I don't know if you can see this book.
Complete, I can't read the title. I can see the picture though. Let's see, it's the complete,
Oh,
complete
the complete
anagram.
anagram.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. 27 paths to self-knowledge, right?
Yes. If you know anything about that. So that's me. And I'm an Enneagram 5, which means we kind of gather data, read a lot. And I like to say, well, I go in my cave and read a lot. And when I'll come out and share it. And if people don't like it, I go back and read more. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. The other thing is, I just thought about this in the last 6 months or so. Being born in the middle of the Depression in 35, I call it, in terms of today, that's primitive. That was a primitive time in comparison today and what we see. And I try to tell people a little bit about it, but their eyes glaze over. So I don't go there very much anymore. But so the things that I'm reading, I was for a while, I discovered Bill Bryson about 2013 and a little bit about everything. And that opened up my world. And so then I began to read more, and I heard a little brief talk about Schrodinger's cat. And so I read that and began to get involved in the double split conversation. And then I call it the spooky action at a distance, and those sorts of things. But then I just say they're a little bit, maybe I understand it, but I don't. I need a broad picture of it, and I don't go into the detail very much. And so I'm really looking forward to see what happens in 2024 when NASA goes for the moon again and put people on the moon, and what that looks like. And of course, the Mars rover is big in the news right now. So I kind of, my life is really in reading a lot, and also being my number 5, we like to meet one-on-one. That's a subtype. There's 3 of them: social, self-preservation, and one-to-one. And I'm a one-to-one. And so I love meeting with people one-to-one and just talk about life and what they're interested in. And if we have a common ground, then we do. And that's great. If we don't, that's okay too. So, but I'm learning not to try to change people's minds. They need to be where they are and what they believe, and I'm okay with where I am. So that's kind of a weakness of mine. But I came across a saying just recently: science is true whether you believe it or not. So, but anyway, I'm interested in this, and I probably am more interested now since you just want to talk about it and hear what people are doing and what they think about it. And so I'm always on that side. I love movies like Interstellar. And there's another one that goes along with it. It's where they're on Mars, I believe. And I think Matt Damon and was in it. And anyway, those were great because, okay, they're kind of somewhat, we don't know what they're like, but it's, I wear an Apple Watch. And back in the 40s, middle 40s and early 50s, there was Dick Tracy, who always had a watch and he could talk to everybody. I thought, but there it is. So, those kinds of things. So, and I'm also of the opinion, and I'm going to just talk. I don't know what you want here. If I talk too much, please slow me down.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, I want to learn. So all the questions have the end goal of making you talk. So if it happens automatically, then that's
so anyway, I'm kind of moved on from, Schrodinger's cat and the double slit experiment and spooky action at a distance. And now I've really got into um,
your inner fish.
by Neil Shubin.
Ah. And my wife is going to be a little upset about this interview because she can already feel the clicking on Amazon.
Okay. Well, yeah, my wife and I, we buy at least a book a week. So we're filled up. But he also wrote, which I really love this one. This is good, by the way. What he does in this fish, it's a 370 million year old fish. And the point of all was, in the fins, it's an amphibian. He has lungs and he has gills. And he can survive on land and survive in the water. But in those fins, there is, our arm, one bone, two bones, a wrist, and digits. And almost every invertebrate or vertebrates today have that, including us people.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of where our body began. I mean, it began, as he says, 3.5 billion years ago. And then the other one is some assembly required. And I don't know if you can read.
I got it. Yeah.
And this is really good because this opened up my eyes to our DNA from ancient fossils to today. And it's all there according to these people who do this. All that history is in our DNA today. And so it really is the future and science, but it's looking back in time. And he does that. What's really good about him, he goes back and talks about from the 16th, 15th century, what has been done and how it came to be. And it's a slow progression of one generation working off of the older generation, and just he covers it that way all the way through to today. And he's a great speaker. He's at the University of Chicago in their research facilities. And so although he's a paleontologist, he knows all of these other people that are working in all of these different areas. And so it's a fun read. And PBS, by the way, did a 180-minute video and put it on PBS in 2014, and you can still find it on Amazon. But anyway, so now I've run out of words.
Well, so you've been studying the progression of life and sort of that natural history. And you mentioned about people, kind of everything building on top of each other. What do you see in terms of the future? I mean, in terms of, say, over the next 500 years, what do you imagine us be on the course of doing?
Well, I think I kind of said this, so my life started, I was living primitively comparatively today, but in 100 years, so will the people that are 20 and 30 and 40 today. In 100 years, 150 years, that will be primitive. And if you think out to 1,000 years and 2,000 years, I don't really go much beyond that, but some of it's scary, going back to the DNA and what they know. Now, what they've done is the DNA of almost every living thing. And in all of us up to humans, they've been able to work on the embryo and go into the embryo and do different things with it. they can identify a gene and what it does, and then they kind of play with that gene in the body. So what I can see is once, and I think it's going to happen, they're going to start working on human embryos. And so we know about cloning, but so there's a goal to be faster, run faster, jump higher. Then you can get into all kinds of thoughts, and it kind of goes down a dark path. But so in space, who knows what that's going to turn out to be. And so the Mars rover, when does the Mars lift over? When are they trying to get the rover to Mars?
So I think it's on like a 5-6 month voyage. I think it's supposed to arrive January or February of 2021.
So going back to the movie, I can't remember the name of it, with Matt Damon, who.
Oh, The Martian.
Yeah, The Martian. And so, yes, I think we'll be living on Mars. I think the moon. I think the hard thing is that, excuse me, geopolitics today is going to be, rather than a unified effort, it's going to be every man for themselves. And so what is that going to look like? And so I kind of look at the downside a little bit too sometimes of all of this. But yes, we're going to be there, I think, living there. Anyway.
And well, you talk about kind of like the editing of genes and embryos and things like that. And the kind of like the advancement of society. But I think back to like Roman times. You sort of had like this huge development in terms of like plumbing and the kind of like the structure of society and the development of language and that type of thing. And it's kind of like it developed up into a certain point, and then pretty much over the course of that 500, 600, 800 years, whatever, you probably could take people from any of those times and transplant them. They probably feel just fine. And then, the Roman Empire falls apart, and you have like the Dark Ages in Europe, and then the Renaissance, and then, kind of like the discovery of the New World and, the Industrial Revolution, and then this huge acceleration in technological progress over the past 100 years. I mean, the historical trend hasn't been to be progressing like we have over the past 100 years. And I'm just kind of wondering if maybe we should really think about, is it realistic to expect it to continue? And, kind of what are the causes for us to have this rapid development, and do those causes, are they getting stronger, or are they fading out? Because you were talking about how you talk about quantum entanglement and those types of things, and people's eyes glaze over. And I'm wondering, while our environment has improved, maybe the quality of the people in that environment hasn't. Maybe it's deteriorated somewhat, because I get the real sense that people, I read things that were written around the 1900s, like H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, and you're like, wow, it's amazing how much he got right, and we hadn't even developed a rocket, and we've not landed anything on Mars, and so much of that was right. And his life was a lot less interrupted than ours, I think. A lot more time spent with his thoughts and thinking things and thinking deeply. And how many of our inventions have been created out of boredom? And when we're in a society where we're constantly being entertained, where do those insights come from? And in a society where, back then it felt like people knew their things deeper and wider than they do now, where all you have to do is know this very specialized thing and you don't do anything outside that thing. You know, it feels like that in some ways we're sort of limiting our ability to grow and to advance.
Yes, I agree with you a lot on that. And um, but what I hope is people like this and other people are. I keep thinking that those people are out there like future H.G. Wells that are still there. Um, but you know, I have no idea. But I do think technology is going to change a lot and change where we are. And so it's I do hope that, now I've read a little bit and I won't go into this deeply, but the um, the Christian right and the gets involved in politics. But anyway, it's kind of slowed down a lot of it's hard, you know, people go out and work in their field in these fields, and then they go to church on Sunday, and it's trying to live back in the past. And so it's kind of slowed down the money spent looking to the future and looking to what we need to do going forward, and NASA and all of that. So I don't want to go very far in that, but so anyway, I think the people who really have a heart to know and to explore and have the ability, I'm just a reader. So, but the people that spend their life doing this is fantastic, and bringing it out to us so, you know, we can educate all of us. And but I don't know, Nathan. That's we can speculate and talk, but I do think that 100 years from now it's going to be vastly different. Maybe good, maybe bad, or maybe both. So
Yeah,
I don't know if we're in the hockey puck still or not, but it seems like it.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot more room, and I think, you know, there's sort of, um, you know, you have, like you were saying earlier, that science is true whether or not you believe in it or not, and it may not be necessarily science per se, as in
Yes, yes,
the laws of the physical world, and you know, reality is real regardless if
yes,
you refuse to
right.
accept it.
Yes. No, it's broader than that. I did know that, but it, uh, it was one of those, I thought, a little pithy statement that expressed a lot of things about a different lot of fields. I think is
Yeah, no, definitely. And you know, you have, I basically see society and humanity as being a big bubble, a sphere. You know,
yes,
it's not like, and outside that sphere is the natural world. And on the seam are those people that are dealing with the natural world. I mean, these are, you know, your miners, your fishermen, your scientists that are observing nature, and you know, what have you. These are the people that are physically connected to that world. And then inside that bubble, you have this very unnatural world that's created based upon um, kind of legacy and precedents and
yes,
arbitrary things. And it seems that within inside of that bubble, there is a suspension of reality. Like, uh,
okay. I like that.
you know, you're able to make it whatever you want to, and you know, life is able to, that bubble is able to persist as long as sort of that seam is still strong enough to protect the middle. But what happens over time, I think, is that the middle becomes so convinced that they know what real is, that there's a decay and a collapse, and then the bubble gets very much smaller, and we find all of ourselves on the seam.
But then what we hope is the bubble keeps getting smaller, but yet from the outside, more people come back into it where it's more dynamic, more willing to look at a lot of different things, and maybe we make progress that way. It's a bubble that collapses and then grows big again and collapses. That's society, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. But it seems to me that you have more people living in that bubble in the cities because you're able to really control your environment a lot more. Um, I mean, just take the concept of money, for example. In its rawest form, money is actually worthless, right? Because you don't need green pieces of paper. What you need is food. You need people to work on problems. You need them to have the resources to solve those problems. And I mean, you could give the entire national budget to like um, some monarch 200 years ago, and they could not make society any better
Right.
with that. Um, you know, but yet in a lot of people's minds, that money is like the thing, is like the critical factor. Whenever it's really the people and the knowledge and the skills that's like the critical factor.
Right. Yes. Yes. That's a good point. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, in fact, all you have to do is look at our student debt problem, kind of, and look at the capabilities of the bulk of the people in that debt, and really question, about whether or not it's worth it.
Yeah. So we I'm just gonna. Well, I don't know what I'm gonna just pour my time into, but from here on out, I've got to go down a little different avenue than I have been, and so I hope there's something out there that I find that, or people write more books like these, so I can find them and read them. But I'm reading up a ton, almost more than I can comprehend and keep in my mind in a logical way. So I go back and read a lot of what I've read in the past to try to help me on that. Anyway, going to the moon, I'm excited about it. I really hope it happens, and then of course I hope to have great results. But it seems there's so much in the world that wants to make sure we're not the first, or we're not doing a good job. I don't know. We'll just have to see how that plays out.
Now, if I've done my math right, you were 34 during the first moon landing.
I'm sorry?
I said, if I've done my math correctly, you were 34 whenever we first landed on the moon.
Tell me what years. 60?
1969.
So 65, yeah, 34. Yes, never thought of it. Yeah.
And so, what was that like? I mean, what were people thinking at that time and leading up to that? And, like how was the world then from what you experienced?
Well, of course, I read a lot about it, read all the newspapers, and heard some of the people that were on those trips come back and talk about them later in life. And but you know what? I was 34, so where was I? 69. I was 71. I moved to Norway. 60. Because I was with an oil company. Those early years, I moved a lot. Texas, New Mexico, Alaska, Santa Barbara. That was those 4 years. leading up to 1969. So I was living in Ohio and working hard. And so what I'm trying to say is I wasn't really somebody really interested in the moon about it. I was, great for the U.S., great for those people that made it, and they made it back safely, and what an accomplishment that was. But I wasn't into it much. It was just really working away and trying to find my path in the company I worked for then. It's and so all of this has happened since I've had the free time to kind of just spend time on it. And it's really more probably in the last 10 years as I begin to think about some of the things that we were doing. In those years with the oil company, I did travel a lot international. We lived 11 years overseas, 4 years in Norway and 7 in London. But even when we came back to the States, made a trip to China and to Japan, 2 trips to Japan, to the Middle East, and the Ivory Coast, Egypt, and anyway, a lot of places. And even after I retired, we traveled a tremendous amount, even made Afghanistan in 2004, and Indonesia, and Turkey, and Azerbaijan, and Thailand. And so, yeah, we've been on the go, but probably 2018, we went to Tanzania. They did the safari trips, and then a trip to, kind of a working trip to Switzerland, and we're kind of, and then today's travel and being cooped up in people are not so pleasant to travel with, and cooped up in a tube and for hours on end. It's just not fun anymore. So we're driving a lot.
Yeah, of course. That's probably the conditions by which people will be traveling around the solar system. So maybe this is good practice, or a good test, a good filter.
So one last thing I'll say, so let me, your take on this. And so I got in a discussion about what's true. And so what's absolutely true. And so somebody said, well, the thing I know that's absolutely true, if all people die, the sun's going to keep shining, the earth is going to keep running around the sun, and it's going to keep shining for at least another billion years. And then things might begin to go haywire, but that's still going to happen. You might call that absolute truth. Unless, of course, an asteroid of some sort bumps into the earth and causes another catastrophe. But
yeah, and that's also another reason to go to the moon is, every night you look up, every hour there's a big enough asteroid or meteor that you can see. That we're constantly being bombarded by rocks of various sizes. And the Earth is lucky enough to have like a really thick atmosphere. And even the things that make it through the atmosphere usually land up in the ocean, because that's over 50% of the surface. And the ones that do make it on land, you see their impact for a while, but usually they get weathered and grown over, and it's very easy to kind of walk around and not give it much thought.
Right.
But you take a look at the moon, it has no atmosphere, it has no weather, and everything that's hit it is still visible. I think one of the things that we could maybe get out of the moon is sort of, since it's been traveling in the same space as the Earth, it's been taking small samples of the same types of things that have been hitting the Earth. Comet Neowise, I think goes around the sun, every few thousand years. and we just discovered it in March. It's just like, um, by studying the moon, it's sort of like this ancient library of all those meteor impacts that have been hitting the Earth, what they're made out of, the relative sizes, the age of those impacts. It helped to paint a picture of exactly, is there some massive collection of debris that's in this very long orbit around the sun that intersects with the Earth's orbit that comes around every so often. It would be a help us figure that out, I think.
Yes, you're right. So Neil wrote another book called The Universe Within. Yeah. And in that, he talks about the same thing you just talked about. That's how the Earth, it was just a bunch of rocks in a close, relatively same orbit, and more collected, but goes on and on. So one of the things they'll look for in the moon is, so there's lots of theories. Maybe you have a good theory for how the moon came to be. But what they'll be looking for are the rocks that they can find them on the Earth, the same rocks, both in the moon and in the Earth. So if the moon was really blasted out of the Earth's, there should be some rocks, some way of identifying similar rocks, similar layers that have been produced on the Earth over time. So that would be interesting. The other thing is, he talks about in the water, some of the water was, as the Earth went through its convulsions of different things, some was squeezed out of rocks. And so and I guess all rocks have a certain amount of water in them. I don't know. I never even thought about that. Who would have thought? But so looking for water on the moon.
Well, actually, we found water ice on the moon in 2010.
Yes.
In some permanently shadowed craters,
Right.
we found deposits of water. We don't know how accessible that is, but
Yes. Well, didn't they find even on Venus, that lives in this huge high temperature, that there are places that have frozen ice on
I
Venus in the shadows and that never see the sun?
I hadn't heard that. I'll have to check it out.
Well, I'm not sure. I just read this recently, and even maybe I read it in Neil's book. I can't remember but anyway, yes, I think so. Some of that will be, there will be a lot of digging, hopefully, and it's going to take time until we can plant people to live permanently on the moon, and they can walk around and live day to day for a period of time. But so that will be a fascinating, I guess I won't get to see that, but that's okay. My family will, my grandchildren will, and maybe that will be something they're excited about. But going back in this, now what he says is the Earth finally connected and had enough water on the Earth, and the oceans began to form. And so it was a carbon dioxide atmosphere, but organisms began to live that could live in one-cell organisms. And they lived here for 1 billion years, but they consumed carbon dioxide and pumped out oxygen. And that's how we got our atmosphere of oxygen, the percentage of oxygen that we have. Had you ever heard that?
That a bacteria pumped out the oxygen.
Yeah.
I had heard that. Yeah, that that oxygen isn't stable naturally. You need some type of process to reproduce it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I can begin to take some of that to the bank, maybe.
Oh, but I mean, um, I guess that's another reason if the moon did come from the Earth, maybe some of that early atmosphere is also preserved
Yes.
in some way.
Yes. Well, anyway, um, 30 minutes, is that what you try to hold these to?
Oh, it's all up to your time schedule. The shortest one I had was um, I think a minute, and the longest one was 3.5 hours. So
Wow.
there's clearly some flexibility there.
Oh, okay. Well, um, it's been an interesting conversation, and I thank you for talking back to me about some of the things you're thinking about, and particularly structure of society. And so I have to ponder that. That might be a good area to explore.
Well, I did have three specific questions I wanted to ask you if we could run through
Oh,
them real
okay.
quick.
Sure.
So, first of all, when did you hear that we were going to the moon in 2024?
Uh, I don't remember. And Nathan, these things come up, and so I'll be frank with you. I haven't thought too much about it until Kent told me about you, and I said, "Yeah, I'd like to talk to him about it." So now I've begun to come up to date on going to the moon. So I'd have to say, within the seriousness, just since I've heard about you and what you wanted to do, and what you're doing, so it wasn't an area that I was interested in at the time.
I would say that 80% of the people I've talked to said pretty much the same thing you just did.
Okay. Well, I was feeling bad.
No, no. Um, uh, but uh, and so, what do you think about it? I mean, because not everybody's for it. Some people are like, "Why are we spending money going to the moon where we have environmental issues and poverty and global climate change and all
No,
this?"
I think these are great places to spend money to do that. I understand, how they think, and unfortunately, well, I understand how they think, but I think that we should do as much as possible to explore space. Um, and I like the ideas of tourists, getting on spaceships. That's, I think maybe they ought to wait a little bit longer before there's a more learned um, about what all of this is like, and I don't think it's just that it's like an airplane ride to get in a spaceship and get out in space. Protection from everything that happens out in space that we have so much protection here on Earth for, that it doesn't bother us. So I'm all for exploring. I'm all for going for it, and we need to put more money to it. I believe that too.
And if it was safe and affordable, would you have an interest in going into space yourself?
I would. Yeah, I used to think I was really adventuresome. As I age, I'm not quite as adventuresome as I have been. Um, but yes, yes. If I was 50, even 60, maybe even approaching 70, I would be all for it. Yes.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Clyde, I really appreciate your time. And is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, no. I think I kind of, I have a bubble of words. That's something else. An Enneagram 5. Um, we have this bubble of words. Now, I have to say this is about me, not about all fives. Um, no, I've kind of explored everything, and you let me talk, and I appreciate that.
Well,
So,
I really appreciate you sharing. This is very much Enneagram 5 activity, one-on-one
right.
interviews with the hope of trying to develop a wider, deeper understanding of people and how they think about the future.
Well, I thank you for giving me an opportunity. And how are you going to handle this? And are you going to put something all together, or just summarize it, the trends that you see and what people say? Are you going to build a summary and just talk in general about all of this? Or what's the end game? What's the end product?
Well, like people, it's a work in progress. So there's no end game. There is sort of some very basic rules that I have, and that is interview one different person a day, every day into 2024. And I just take the videos, unedit it, and put it on my Countdown to the Moon website. I was um, planning, I mean, I have a guy that every couple of weeks, he takes a week's worth of videos and sort of creates a little summary. But I'm thinking about trying to summarize them or take some insights. But right now, it, I'm pretty much at my extent just keeping up on the baseline. So I'm thinking that after 2024 is over with, I might have more time, energy, and perspective to do something really useful with them. Sort of one way I've been thinking about the project. I mean, it's primarily started out as a personal improvement project. I work from home, and I've been working from home for 2 years. And I could go several days and maybe even a week or two without actually going out of the house. So I was thinking that this project I was planning to do all my interviews in person, like at the coffee shop or at the
Yeah.
stores or what have you. And this project would force me to get out and meet one person a day. And then with the COVID-19 thing, I've had to kind of adapt. So that's kind of how it started. Um, but I kind of envision this as being sort of like a time capsule of people's perspectives right before we really start settling space. And I imagine, like a high school girl or guy who grew up on the moon or on Mars being assigned like a research project to say, what were people thinking right before, sort of like what we would have done, researching back during Columbus's time, right? And they would come across this time capsule, and this would be sort of their source material.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. I hope it wasn't too hard doing this on a phone for you.
I know it works perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you. That would be great. So, is there something that is out on the web that I could your website that we're kind of keep up with how it's going?
Absolutely. Countdowntothemoon.org.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar. Okay.
Yeah, right
Okay.
now I have nearly 237 interviews there, and I got 1,601 more to go, or something like that.
Okay. Well, Nathan, what a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you. Okay, have a good night.
I will. Bye.
Bye-bye.